In Albert Camus' essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, we find Sisyphus condemned by the gods to an eternity of pushing a rock up a hill, only to have it fall back down when he reached the top. Albert Camus describes Sisyphus as a, quote, absurd hero, and compares the absurdity and tedious repetition of Sisyphus's task to modern human existence. He defines the absurd as the confrontation with the fact that the world is not reasonable, and the, quote, wild longing for clarity in its murkiness. We are all completing ostensibly pointless tasks, pushing boulders up hills our entire lives, grasping at straws of meaning in a meaningless world. Camus says that when one begins to dwell on their fate, to wallow in their suffering, to wish for peace and happiness, that is when melancholy sets in. But if Sisyphus's descent towards the foot of the hill, and by extension our own absurd existence, can be performed in sorrow, it can also take place in joy. If we accept our circumstances, whatever they may be, and accept ourselves, we can perform our boulder pushing with joy and contentment, rather than resentment and depression. In Little Miss Sunshine, each character, besides Grandpa Edwin, begins their journey in a state of denial. Over the course of the film, we see them grieve losses and struggle towards acceptance. Richard grieves the death of his self-help book deal, and by extension, its contrived winners and losers philosophy. Frank grieves the loss of love to his professional rival. Dwayne grieves his broken dream of being a fighter pilot, and Sheryl grieves the loss of control over her family's troubles. Olive, however, is the exception, and she brings out the best in all of her dysfunctional family members. She brings them closer through bubbly optimism and shameless self-expression, and teaches them that it's okay to not be okay, that it's okay to lose, to fail, to accept what you cannot control. She guides them quietly through their denial, bargaining, anger, and depression, connects them through a shared goal, and ultimately, each character lands on acceptance. Much like Sisyphus, the moment the Hoovers accept their demons is the moment when they have conquered them. They push their van like Sisyphus pushes his boulder, and just the same, they find joy in this silly and ultimately meaningless task. The film tackles a range of topics, from the vapidity of our competition-based society,
life is one fucking beauty contest after another,
to embracing yourself, to capitalism, and to family. But for me, the power of acceptance is its most striking theme. We all suffer at times in our lives, and as Frank points out to Dwayne, suffering is essential. It makes us who we are. Suffering should not be resisted, but accepted. A powerful concept to anybody who's gone through a dark time in their life. Little Miss Sunshine thrives where so many comedies fall flat, in its characters. They're a family of eccentrics, dysfunctional individuals that somehow form a functional whole. In this video, I'll break down each character's journey towards acceptance and how it molds them into a better person. I'll explore the ways in which they accept their circumstances, accept themselves and each other, and how we can all leverage the power of acceptance in order to conquer whatever mountain stands in our way. If you're new around here, my name is Ryan. I am a writer. I do video essays on books and movies and all sorts of other fun stuff. So be sure to subscribe, click that subscribe button, tell a friend about the channel, or just give me a like, whatever. You have the chance to be within the first 100 subscribers on what is sure to be a legendary YouTube channel. So don't miss out. All right, let's get into the video. Dwayne is a rebellious teenager who hates everyone, even his family, or so he says, and commits all his energy towards being an Air Force pilot. He's jaded and somewhat nihilistic, reads Friedrich Nietszche, and has decided to undertake a vow of silence until his goal of becoming a pilot is achieved.
You don't speak because of Friedrich Nietszche. Far out.
Nietzsche's inclusion is not coincidental. You could apply much of Nietzsche's philosophy to Dwayne as a character, but the most obvious parallel to the story is his view of suffering. Nietzsche went so far as to wish suffering on people of importance to him. Quote, "To those human beings who are of any concern to me, I wish suffering, desolation, sickness, ill treatment, indignities. I wish that they should not remain unfamiliar with profound self-contempt, the torture of self-mistrust, and the wretchedness of the vanquished. I have no pity for them, because I wish them the only thing that can prove today whether one is worth anything or not, that one endures." What Nietzsche recognizes here is that suffering offers opportunity for growth. We can't control the curveballs life throws, but we can adjust our swing to compensate for their unexpected movement. Dwayne's arc climaxes in a heart-wrenching moment when he discovers that he is colorblind and thus can never fly jets.
You can't fly jets if you're colorblind.
His dream collapses in an instant, and under the pressure of this implosion, he loses himself in a fit of animalistic rage.
Fuck!
Dwayne's breakdown and subsequent self-overcoming seems inspired by Nietzsche, who says, quote, "You must be ready to burn yourself in your own flame. How could you rise anew if you have not first become ashes?" In what I think is the best scene in Little Miss Sunshine, Dwayne says, quote, "I wish I could go to sleep until I was 18 and skip all this crap. High school and everything, just skip it." But Frank reminds him, using Proust as an example.
If you sleep until you're 18, think of the suffering you're gonna miss. I mean, high school, those are your prime suffering years.
Suffering makes you who you are. Suffering teaches you. Or as Nietzsche put it, quote, "To live is to suffer, and to survive is to find some meaning in suffering." I don't know if everyone would agree with this characterization of suffering, but it certainly struck home for me. I dealt with bad chronic pain for most of my early 20s, and it made me miserable. But to be honest, I wouldn't trade it for the world, because it really shaped my identity and made me into who I am today. And without that experience of suffering, I may still be the bored, complacent, apathetic teenager that I was before my injury. I would take simple things for granted, like concerts or hiking, or not looking for a chair at every damn venue I go to. And this experience, while not as serious as Frank's depression or as angsty as Dwayne's breakdown, taught me that resistance to suffering is futile. It was only once I accepted my suffering and my pain that I was able to move on. Friedrich Nietszche is known for his concept of amor fati, or loving one's fate. Nietzsche takes the concept of acceptance a step further, claiming that we must not only accept, but love ourselves and our fate in totality. In Little Miss Sunshine, Dwayne takes a tumultuous path towards loving his fate, rife with suffering and setbacks. But in the end, he accepts and loves his circumstances. He accepts that he will never be an Air Force pilot, but he resolves to do whatever he can to fly regardless. He accepts his present suffering and hopes it will shape his future. He accepts and loves his family, despite giving voice to his shame and hatred towards them during his breakdown. He accepts the vapidity of society, the shallow competitions we all play with ourselves, and sums up his newfound wisdom in my favorite line from the film, a line that embodies Nietzsche's amor fati.
You do what you love, and fuck the rest.
Perhaps the most poignant example of acceptance is Steve Carell's character, Frank. Frank's journey towards self-acceptance begins on a pretty rough note when we meet him in the hospital having just attempted suicide. He'd been in a depressive spiral originating from unrequited love and a subsequent defeat from his professional rival, a fellow scholar of Marcel Proust, who coincidentally is the same man that his unrequited lover is involved with. Frank begins the film apathetic towards life, his family, and himself. But it is the family's imperfect and dysfunctional love that allows him to accept himself. He may still feel depressed, he may still feel worthless, he may still feel desolate and destroyed, but he can at least reach out to help Olive achieve her goal of winning the Little Miss Sunshine pageant. He may not have realized it, but the family's mission was exactly what Frank needed. We see him smile for the first time after the family gets the broken van started. We see him run, very much how the #1 Proust scholar would run, to register Olive for her competition. We see him comfort Dwayne with Proustian wisdom about suffering, which in turn sheds light on the value of his own present suffering. Marcel Proust said in his magnum opus, In Search of Lost Time,
"Damn, boy, he's thick! Boy, that's a thick-ass boy! Damn!"
that the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. Towards the end of the film, Frank sees with these new eyes an ad in the newspaper, claiming his rival the #1 Proust scholar in the world, a title Frank had proudly and sometimes sarcastically claimed for himself.
I just want everyone here to know that I am the preeminent Proust scholar in the United States.
Rather than wallow in self-pity of this injustice, he simply tosses aside the paper without a second thought. Through the family who he has not seen in at least a year, Frank accepts himself and the cruelty of his situation. This represents his final acceptance of lost love and the first step in a painful journey of 1,000 miles towards a new life. Richard is the family's archetypal patriarch and philosophical antagonist of the film, clinging to the dying breath of his contrived 9-step refuse to lose program towards success. His perceived reputation, respect, and position of authority within the family come under attack when a supposed lock of a book deal is ripped out from under him. There's no step in this program for dealing with failure, other than never giving up, and this is what he tries to do. But because of the inherent shallowness in his philosophy that there are two types of people in this world, winners and losers, he has no clue how to react when it becomes clear that it's time to move on. Richard mourns the death of what ostensibly was a massive risk, financially and personally, and even exhibits each of the 5 stages of grief. Denial when his many calls to Walter White, Stan Grossman, go unanswered. Bargaining when he insists that Grossman not give up and try harder. Depression while driving, anger while fighting with Sheryl, and finally, acceptance of his failure. An acceptance that is diametrically opposed to his winner-loser philosophy. Ironically, it takes the actual death of his father to make him realize the error in his ways. When all of this loss comes crashing down, Richard clings harder onto the silly little mission of getting Olive to the beauty pageant at all costs. Richard never says it explicitly, but in my viewing, it becomes clear that he abandons his obsession with winning in the final scene, where the family comforts Olive after she loses, aka gets kicked out of, the Little Miss Sunshine pageant.
Olive, your grandpa would have been really proud of you.
While earlier in the film, Richard chastised Olive for eating ice cream.
Let me ask you this. Those women in Miss America, are they skinny or are they fat?
And gave her a pep talk that basically said there's no point in doing anything unless the object is to win. His final conversation with her strikes a much different tone. In this, he sets aside his simplistic shackles of the winner-loser philosophy that leaves no room for nuance. And his words echo his own father's comfort when Richard learned that he had lost his book deal.
Whatever happens, you try to do something on your own, which is more than most people ever do. And I include myself in that category. You took a big chance. You took guts, and I'm proud of you.
Richard learns to accept his circumstances, to accept the fact that sometimes your best simply isn't good enough, and to accept the fact that it's okay to lose. Sheryl's introduction is a perfect encapsulation of her energy through the beginning of the film. She's smoking a cigarette, lying about smoking a cigarette, and arguing on the phone with Richard. She is visibly stressed, living with her foul-mouthed, perverted drug addict of a father-in-law.
Every night it's the fucking chicken. Holy God almighty. Is it possible just once
Dad?
we could get something to eat for dinner around here that's not the goddamn fucking chicken?
Hey.
Her unspeaking son, her frustrating husband, and now her suicidal brother. She just wants everyone to be okay, but becomes frustrated when they don't care to change. Sheryl learns to accept that she cannot control what other people do or how they feel. She can only be there for them when they reach out. There's a particularly excellent piece of physical acting by Toni Collette during Dwayne's breakdown, when her character wants to reach out and touch him, hold him, comfort him, but he insists on being left alone. She feels powerless. She only wants him to be okay. But she realizes that there is simply nothing she can do. This is such a universal feeling that we all at times want to help the people in our life, or to stop them from making a mistake, or simply to be there for them. But we all must learn to accept that this is sometimes impossible. People are going to do what they do, behave how they want to, and at a certain point, you just have to let them live their lives. Olive is a ray of sunshine amidst the chaos, depression, angst, dysfunction, addiction, and perfectionism of her family. She is a bastion of impressionable innocence, but her mind is being polluted by her father's obsession with winning, power, and competition. We see this constantly throughout the film, like when he describes to Olive that Frank's attempted suicide was because he gave up on himself. He lost. He's a loser. It's not a stretch to assume that her beauty pageant obsession is caused by her father's toxic insistence that she be a winner.
Is he always like this?
Olive, why don't you tell us how your routine's
How can you stand it?
What I love about Little Miss Sunshine is that each character has serious flaws, but Olive brings out the best in each of them. She shows her father how damaging his worldview is. She gives Frank a reason to live, if only for a little while. She wordlessly consoles Dwayne during his emotional breakdown. She gives her grandpa energy and passion in his late life. And she gives Sheryl a break from her constant worrying about the people she loves. Olive's acceptance is one of self-acceptance. She embraces who she is and does so passionately. In the twisted and sexualized world of child beauty passions, Olive's raunchy performance ironically disgusts the attendants and judges, who were perfectly comfortable watching spray-tanned children in bikinis perform equally provocatively. The family watches on as the crowd heckles her, and the MC tries to usher her off stage. But one by one, we see the family rush on to support her. Richard, having shed his win-at-all-costs mentality. Frank, having accepted his suffering and his family's love. Dwayne, having realized that even shattered dreams cannot destroy life's value. And Sheryl, understanding that the people she loves have conquered their demons, and have done so not needing her constant attention. The film concludes with Olive being disqualified from any further pageantry, an outcome the family is all too happy to accept, and each character, in the words of Nietzsche, having burned themselves in their own flames and risen anew from the ashes. Their growth is not complete, it never is, but the barbell of expectations weighing them down has been lifted, and they are ready to conquer whatever life throws at them next. In Albert Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus, he describes with great interest the moment that Sisyphus sees the rock tumble back to the foot of the hill and begins the walk back down. Quote, "A face that toils so close to stones is already stone itself. I see that man going back down with a heavy yet measured step toward the torment of which he will never know the end. that hour like a breathing space which returns as surely as his suffering. That is the hour of consciousness. At each of these moments, when he leaves the heights and gradually sinks towards the lair of the gods, he is superior to his fate. He is stronger than his rock. Camus uses Sisyphus's task as an allegory for humanity's futile search for meaning and truth in an indifferent universe. The workman of today works every day in his life at the same tasks, and his fate is no less absurd. But it is tragic at only the rare moments when it becomes conscious. What Camus is saying here is that when one's consciousness lingers on their fate, their suffering, and wishes for happiness, that is when they fall into hopelessness and misery. Quote, "This is the rock's victory. This is the rock itself. The boundless grief is too heavy to bear, but crushing truths perish from being acknowledged. Little Miss Sunshine represents the acceptance of our fate." We see Dwayne grapple with his fate when he discovers that he can no longer be a fighter pilot. He dwells on his fate, and in Camus' words, his boundless grief is too heavy to bear. But with the help of Frank, a man who knows suffering well, he comes to peace and acceptance of his conditions, and in this he finds joy. Quote, "There is no sun without shadow, and it is essential to know the night." The Hoover family have quelled their burdens, for now, but something sinister always lurks around the corner in life. Quote, "One always finds one's burden again." The family will continue on, pushing their boulders much like the minivan in which they traveled, and driving off into the unknown. Dwayne will discover new troubles when he graduates high school. Richard will need a new philosophy to live by. Olive will need a new passion. Frank will have to rebuild his life from the ground up. Sheryl will likely lapse back into anxieties. And Grandpa Edwin, well, perhaps he will find his own rock in the afterlife. The Hoovers will struggle onward, but, quote, "The struggle in itself is enough to fill a man's heart. And in this struggle, one must imagine the Hoovers happy." Thank you so much, everybody who stuck around to the end of the video. I'm doing a new thing where if you stick around to the end, I tell you what my favorite word is or phrase at the moment. And right now I'm reading Crime and Punishment, and my favorite phrase from that book is "Pah! Devil take it," or "Devil take him." I think I'm going to start working that into just normal conversation. If somebody's annoying me, I'll just be like, "Pah! Devil take you." So we'll see if this catches on. Please, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. I hope you stick around, check out my other videos, and just subscribe. What are you waiting for? You can be within the first 100 subscribers, as I said earlier, and that is a feat in itself, I think. I have another video in the works that is sort of a secret. It's a little something new, a little something spicy. So that's coming your way shortly. And in the meantime, peace and love, and I'll see you next time.